So, you have $1 billion in liquid capital, and you've decided to buy a private army. Maybe you're bored of traditional index funds, you're tired of real estate portfolios, and you want to enter the oldest and most lucrative business in human history, privatized warfare. You find a discreet building, hire a couple of ex-special forces operators, buy some heavy ammunition, and start billing governments. It sounds like the ultimate monopoly. But here is the paradox that Wall Street won't tell you. The most successful private army in modern American history didn't make its fortune by shooting. Out of the 40,000 missions Blackwater executed in Iraq, a weapon was fired in exactly 200 of them. So if they weren't fighting, why exactly did the United States government pay them $1 billion? What does this industry actually sell? Why are sovereign states willing to pay up to 6 times more for a man with a rifle than they would for their own soldiers? And most importantly, why do almost all the CEOs who found these corporations eventually end up in federal court or on private jets that mysteriously fall from the sky? Welcome to the dark economics of private military companies. To understand this business model, we first need to look at your balance sheet and the actual cost of deploying violence. In 2007, at the height of the Iraq War, the US Congress declassified a report revealing the core economic unit of your new enterprise, a single armed contractor in Baghdad. The cost to the client was $1,222 a day. That's roughly $445,000 a year for a single man. A regular American soldier doing the exact same job on the exact same street, wearing the exact same uniform and holding the exact same rifle cost the taxpayer about 6 times less. Where does that money go? Out of that $1,222, your employee takes home about $600. The rest vanishes into the OpEx of violence. You are paying for astronomical life insurance premiums, encrypted logistics, private medical evacuations, and, of course, your corporate margin. As the owner of the PMC, you keep a clean 15 to 25% on every single contract. And these aren't small boutique contracts. In 2008, Blackwater kept just 987 armed contractors in Iraq. That is less than the size of one regular Army battalion. With those 987 men, the company protected the entire American diplomatic corps in Iraq, from the ambassador down to visiting congressmen. For that service, the State Department paid nearly $1 billion. But the American model isn't the only way to structure this business. Long before Blackwater arrived in the Middle East, another company proved exactly how profitable an autonomous army could be. In 1995, a small South African company called Executive Outcomes signed a contract with the government of Sierra Leone to suppress an insurgency that had been tearing the country apart for 5 years. Executive Outcomes deployed just 200 men, 21 months of work. Their fee? $35 million in cash, plus a highly lucrative stake in the country's diamond mines as a bonus. They ended the war, secured the resources, and extracted a fortune. It was the ultimate proof of concept for the private military industry. A small, highly trained corporate force could stabilize a nation and monopolize its natural wealth faster than the United Nations. Managing that level of operational expense, offshore accounts, and resource extraction requires institutional-grade precision. Now, if you are managing your own capital, hopefully without having to deploy armed contractors in foreign countries, you need to track your assets with the exact same cold, calculated logic. That's why we built the Sur Capital Portfolio Tracker. It's the internal Notion system we use to track liquidity, alternative assets, and market monopolies. The link to download it is in the description. Now, back to your private army. As an investor looking at the numbers, paying $1 billion for less than 1,000 men makes absolutely no logical sense. The government could use its own military at a fraction of the cost. So what exactly are they buying with that premium? The answer to our corporate riddle boils down to one simple institutional concept: plausible deniability. When a regular soldier dies in combat, the state inherits a massive contingent liability. They have to pay a military pension for his family, Congress demands official reports, a flag-draped coffin arrives on the evening news, and it becomes a permanent name added to a list that voters can count. In 2010, for the first time in any American war, more private contractors died in Iraq and Afghanistan than regular US soldiers. None of those state obligations exist for a contractor. The premium the government pays you is the accounting difference between a soldier's death, which the state must absorb politically, and a contractor's death, which the state does not have to report. You are not selling security. You are selling political laundering. The American model is billed in dollars through legal contracts and congressional lobbying. But there is a much more aggressive monetization model. Yevgeny Prigozhin, a former convict who sold hot dogs in St. Petersburg before getting close to Vladimir Putin, pushed this model to its absolute limit. By 2018, he was running Russia's largest private army, the Wagner Group. Wagner didn't bill through bureaucratic ministries. Their structure was raw extraction capitalism. They entered the Central African Republic, a country with a permanent insurgency, without a bank transfer. Wagner simply took control of the Indasima gold mine, the largest in the country, with estimated reserves of $2.8 billion. They extracted the gold and shipped it straight to Russia. In Sudan, Wagner controlled the country's main gold processing plant. In Syria, they received a share in oil and gas fields they had recaptured from ISIS. In 2022 and 2023 alone, Wagner generated roughly $2.5 billion in gold for the Kremlin. What Blackwater took 13 years to accumulate through U.S. government contracts, Wagner pulled out of the African dirt in solid gold in less than 2. Both ends of the political spectrum are buying the exact same product, the ability to fight a war that officially does not exist. But this is where your fantasy of being a corporate warlord crashes into reality. Every private military company carries a structural flaw in its DNA that no team of lawyers can fix. The first risk is quality control from the inside. If you own a tech company and an employee has a bad day, you lose a client. If you own a private army and your employee has a bad day, you create an international incident. On September 16, 2007, a Blackwater convoy of 4 armored vehicles drove into Nisour Square in central Baghdad. 20 minutes later, 17 Iraqi civilians lay dead. According to other contractors who were there, one of the guards simply began firing and panicked until another contractor put a rifle barrel to his head to force him to stop. That single employee destroyed the company. The Iraqi Prime Minister demanded they be expelled. They lost their license to operate in Iraq. The founder, Eric Prince, eventually had to sell the company, and the name was changed 3 times just to put as much distance as possible between what it had been and what it had done. When your product is armed men in foreign countries, your biggest threat is never the enemy. It is your own convoy. The second risk comes from the outside. A private army has a strange ceiling. The smaller you stay, the more useful you are. But the bigger you grow, the more dangerous you become to the person who hired you. In June 2023, this is exactly what caught up with Prigozhin. Wagner had become the most successful private army Russia had ever produced. It had its own armored columns, air defense, and a massive propaganda machine. Prigozhin himself had become a public figure with millions of followers. He was no longer just a contractor, he was a parallel state. So, he marched 25,000 of his men on Moscow. 24 hours later, he turned around. He was seemingly forgiven by Putin. But 2 months after that, his private jet exploded in midair over the Tver region, with his deputy and chief financial officer on board. Within a year, Wagner was dissolved and absorbed into the state. The better your private army gets, the closer it comes to being a real one. And no government, democratic or authoritarian, will ever tolerate a real army it does not officially own. So, knowing all of this, should you buy a private army? Look at the institutional numbers. The global market for private military services today is around $274 billion, and it is growing. International monitors are tracking active armed conflicts in over 30 countries. Each one of those conflicts is generating demand that no official army can politically supply. Today, 10 corporate giants share most of this global market. The largest of them, Allied Universal, pulls in around $21 billion a year on its own. Constellus, the company that absorbed Blackwater, runs 22,000 armed contractors across more than 30 countries. The industry's total annual revenue is expected to grow by an additional $175 billion over the next decade. It is a brutal bull market. The math guarantees massive returns, but be very clear about what you are operating. It is a hyper-leveraged geopolitical franchise. One bad shot destroys your monopoly, and an excess of success turns you into your own client's military target. It is the highest yielding asset on Earth, as long as you manage to survive your own end-of-year audit. If you found this institutional breakdown valuable, subscribe to Sir Capital. Until next time.